Captain Zix Thor stood tall on the command deck of his ship, the Stellar Serpent, his reflection visible in the sleek console in front of him. He blinked his 3 eyes in unison, a tactic he had perfected to make himself seem more fearsome to the crew. Adjusting his elaborate pirate hat, a flamboyant relic he had taken from a museum ship near the Centaur colonies, he declared, "Report now." Lieutenant Beck scurried forward, her 6 legs making sharp, clicking sounds on the cold metal floor. "Captain, we've detected a Class 7 civilization in Sector 989. Initial scans show little space presence and minimal orbital activity. Their planet is about 70% covered by liquid dihydrogen monoxide." A sly grin spread across Zix Thor's face as his mouth tentacles twitched. "A water world, eh? They always have the best treasures. What about their defenses?" "Nothing to be concerned about, sir," First Officer Krill responded, his antennae twitching as he worked at his console. "Their vessels are mostly small, scattered across the oceans, but they're outdated. Primitive combustion engines. Are those fishing nets?" "Indeed," Science Officer Pix interjected, his tone dripping with superiority. "These primitive creatures use them to harvest aquatic organisms. Their technology is a joke. They haven't even cracked quantum entanglement communication." Laughter filled the bridge, a sound akin to a swarm of angry crickets in a confined space. Zix Thor held up a hand to silence them. "Show me these vessels," he commanded. The main screen powered up, displaying images of various boats, fishing trawlers hauling nets, commercial vessels with long fishing lines, and smaller recreational boats dotted across the waters. Zix Thor sneered. "Look at this pitiful display. No shields, no plasma cannons, not even basic antimatter containment. This will be easier than stealing from a Gloran nursery." Navigator Trill hesitated, raising a tentacle. "Sir, we should take note of the strange oceanic readings. The salinity levels alone are—" "Enough," Zix Thor bellowed, his scales flickering with annoyance. "I've successfully plundered 47 primitive worlds. I once stole a whole moon right out from under the Galactic Alliance's nose. Do you think I'm going to fear some salty water?" The navigator quickly retreated, head lowered. "Scan for the area with the highest concentration of these vessels," Zix Thor ordered. "We'll begin with a small raid to test their response. These so-called humans probably don't even understand what a spaceship is." As his crew sprang into action, Zix Thor allowed himself to daydream about the fame this raid would bring him, the legendary pirate who conquered Earth. He could already imagine himself featured on Galaxy's most successful pirates, just after Captain Zarks, the idiot who had somehow managed to steal a whole nebula last cycle. "Captain," Lieutenant Beeks called out, "we found an ideal area. It's called the Grand Banks. There's a high density of fishing vessels there." "Perfect," Zix Thor said with a grin. "Set course and prepare the boarding pods. And wake up the grunt crew. We're about to make history. Make sure to put on your scariest battle armor," Captain Zix Thor commanded, his voice heavy with malice. "I want these primitives trembling in their boots when we arrive." As the Stellar Serpent cruised quietly toward Earth, its crew remained blissfully unaware of a subtle warning hidden in the corner of their scanner display. A notice that the planet's oceanic salinity levels resembled those found in the fabled Kraken breeding grounds of Proxima Centaur 4, a place now known as the final resting spot of many overconfident space explorers. But surely, it was just a coincidence. In the war room, the air buzzed with excitement as Captain Zix Thor's senior officers gathered around the tactical table. Holograms of Earth's fishing vessels rotated above them, each one more laughable than the last. "Look at this one," Science Officer Pix said, enlarging an image of a fishing trawler. "They actually use ropes to haul in their catch, no gravity manipulators in sight." Lieutenant Beeks flicked through more ship schematics with one of her secondary limbs. "Their biggest vessels barely exceed 400 feet. The smallest would fit comfortably in our waste disposal compartment." "What kind of weapons do they have?" First Officer Krill asked, trying to maintain a hint of professionalism amid the growing arrogance of the room. Pix expanded another image, revealing a simple flare gun. "This appears to be their primary method of defense, firing brightly lit projectiles into the sky, presumably to call for help." "How charming," Zix Thor mused. "But what about these odd devices?" Navigator Trill raised a tentative appendage, his concern palpable. "Sir, these readings from their fishing nets, the material composition doesn't match anything in our database. That's because our database doesn't waste space on outdated technology." Pix snapped, eager to move on. Now, about the boarding strategy. The planning continued for another hour, with the pirates' confidence swelling with each passing minute. They plotted their entry vectors, discussing the best way to make a dramatic entrance from their cloaked ship, and even debated who would deliver the traditional pirate victory speech. No one noticed the subtle warning flashing on the environmental console about unusual unusual electrical activity in Earth's oceans. No one questioned why a species that could only catch one fish at a time had managed to become the dominant life form on the planet. It settled then, Zix-Thor declared at last, bringing the meeting to a close. Tomorrow, we begin our raid on the most primitive targets we've ever seen. These humans won't know what hit them. As the officers filed out, Lieutenant Beck lingered. Sir, should we perhaps check the Galactic database for any historical records of this sector? She asked, a note of hesitation in her voice. Zix-Thor scoffed. What a waste of time. What could possibly go wrong? These humans will probably surrender as soon as they see our boarding pods. Now go and prepare the crew, and make sure they wear their flashiest armor. I want these humans to understand the honor of being robbed by real space pirates. Beck nodded and left, though she couldn't shake the nagging sense that they were overlooking something critical. But surely the captain was right. What could a bunch of primitive fishing boats do against the might of their advanced alien technology? They were about to find out. The morning sun gleamed off the Atlantic surface as Captain Zix-Thor's boarding pods plunged through Earth's atmosphere, their cloaking devices working flawlessly to render them invisible to the planet's primitive detection systems. Target vessel locked. Lieutenant Beaks's voice came over the comm. Designation: Lucky Strike. Length: 120 feet. Crew count: 12 humans. Good. Zix-Thor's voice crackled through the comm. Make sure this raid is memorable. I want these primitive beings spreading tales of us across their pathetic networks. 3 boarding pods positioned themselves around the fishing trawler, their dark silhouettes poised for an intimidating arrival. Inside the lead pod, Warrior Chief GRA adjusted his battle armor, tweaking extra spikes on his suit for maximum intimidation. Disengage, cloaking on my mark. Zix-Thor commanded from the Stellar Serpent's bridge. 3, 2, 1, mark. The pods flickered into visibility, hovering ominously above the Lucky Strike. The pirates braced for the inevitable chaos and fear they expected to elicit, preparing for terrified screams and humans on their knees begging for mercy. But instead, a gruff voice called from the deck of the trawler. Hey, Billy, check this out. Looks like they're shooting a movie or something. GRA's jaw dropped inside his helmet. They mock us, he seethed. Warriors, deploy, he barked. The pod doors exploded open, and 30 heavily armed pirates descended via magnetic tethers, their armor gleaming under the early morning sun. They landed in perfect formation on the deck, weapons raised and ready. Human Remy, GRA bellowed through his translator. We are mighty space pirates. Surrender your vessel, or face the wrath of the stars. Captain Mike Peterson of the Lucky Strike took a leisurely sip from his coffee mug, glanced at the aliens, then turned to his first mate with a smirk. Well, look at this. We've got space pirates, huh? He said with a chuckle. Think we should offer them some coffee? Hey Billy, you better call Bob on the St. Marie. He won the bet. There really are space pirates. Kneel before a scruh. GRA's translator screamed, the volume echoing across the deck. Hold on a sec, Peterson called out, pressing a button on the ship's console. Let me just bring in the nets. The winch system roared to life as massive steel cables tensed, and the entire vessel shifted under the weight of what was being hauled up from the depths. What kind of sorcery is this? One of the pirates gasped as the deck swayed beneath his feet. Cease your primitive machinery, GRA demanded, aiming his plasma rifle at the winch. Sure thing, just let me finish this, Peterson said nonchalantly, flipping another switch. The nets finally broke the surface, but instead of the expected fish, they carried something far more intriguing. 3 spherical objects covered in barnacles. Are those? Lieutenant Beck's voice wavered over the comm. Our magnetic disruption mines, Zix-Thor shrieked from the Stellar Serpent. How did they? We found your little gifts on our sonar about an hour ago, Peterson grinned. Thought you might like them back. The pirates watched in horror as their prized magnetic disruption mines, designed to disable human vessels, were now tangled in the nets, wrapped in thick fishing line and kelp. You know what's funny about saltwater? Peterson mused, his tone casual. It rusts metal pretty quickly, especially delicate alien gadgets like these. I imagine, almost on cue, one of the mines flickered and sparked weakly, its lights dimming out entirely. Retreat to the pods, GRA shouted, but as he turned to make his escape, a new problem arose. The magnetic tethers, designed to work in harmony with the mine's magnetic fields, were malfunctioning. Half of his warriors found themselves stuck to the metal deck of the Lucky Strike, their advanced armor stubbornly refusing to budge. Having trouble with your fancy suits? Billy's voice called out, breaking through the the radio silence. By the way, Bob says thanks for making him $50 richer. Oh, and the Gulf Fleet sends their regards. What do you mean, the Gulf Fleet? Zix Thor barked through the comm, his mind racing. The answer came swiftly in the form of dozens of vessels appearing on their scanners, emerging from behind the thermal camouflage created by strategically placed ice fishing thermoclines. See, while you boys were putting on your little light show, Captain Peterson explained, now casually holding his own radio, we were having a nice chat with your other target vessels. Turns out folks don't take too kindly to pirates around here, spacefaring or otherwise. Back on the Stellar Serpent's bridge, pandemonium erupted as sensor alarms screamed to life. Captain, Pix shouted in panic. They're launching something, missile ZS? Zix Thor's voice was filled with hope. Missiles? No, sir, Krill replied, a look of disbelief crossing his face. Fishing nets. Really big ones. The color drained from Zix Thor's scales. Our shields should be able to, sir, Krill interrupted. Remember how we had to adjust our shields to deploy the magnetic mines? A heavy silence swept across the bridge as the realization sank in. Meanwhile, on the deck of the Lucky Strike, Captain Peterson addressed the now increasingly anxious pirates. Now then, seems we have two options here. One, you all surrender nice and peaceful, and we'll help get those suits unstuck. Or two, he waved a hand toward the incoming vessels, their massive nets glinting in the sunlight. Ever wonder what it feels like to be a tuna? GRA stared at his warriors, mighty space pirates, now trapped by their own technology. He glanced at the approaching fleet of fishing vessels, then at the boarding pods, now tangled in fishing nets. He made the only rational choice. We surrender, GRA said, his voice defeated. Wonderful, Peterson beamed. Billy, break out the coffee. Looks like we've got some guests for breakfast. Anyone want to learn how to shuck oysters in Earth's orbit? Back on the Stellar Serpent, Captain Zix Thor watched helplessly as his flawless raid turned into a cosmic farce. The main view screen displayed a sight no space pirate had ever imagined. Hundreds of fishing boats, coordinating with the precision of a military fleet. Status report, Zix Thor barked, his scales flickering between panic purple and embarrassment green. Sir, Krill stammered, we're tracking vessels from every major fishing fleet on Earth. Norwegian trawlers from the north, Spanish boats from the east, Japanese longliners from the Pacific. They're hurting us. We're a spacefaring warship. How dare these primitives? Captain, Navigator Trill interrupted, urgency in his voice. You need to see this transmission. They're broadcasting it on all frequencies. The screen switched to reveal Captain Peterson's grinning face. Behind him, GRA and his warriors sat on the Lucky Strike's deck, their high-tech armor now covered in fish guts and barnacles. Some were even assisting the crew in sorting through the morning's catch, looking thoroughly defeated. Having a good day up there, space friends? Peterson asked cheerfully. Notice anything interesting about your tactical display? Zix Thor froze as he glanced at the sensor readings. His worst fears were confirmed. The pirates were being outmaneuvered by nothing more than fishermen. The fishing vessels had arranged themselves in a formation Zix Thor recognized all too well. No, impossible, he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. That's a Senton drift net formation. Funny thing about us humans, Captain Peterson continued, pausing to sip his coffee. We might catch fish one at a time for sport, but when it comes to commercial fishing, well, let's just say we've gotten real good at catching big things that don't want to be caught. Lieutenant Beaks, Zix Thor barked, turning to his officer as panic started to spread across the bridge. What's happening? Lieutenant Beck worked furiously at her console, eyes wide with dread. Sir, the Portuguese fleet is deploying something called a pursign net. The Norwegians are launching their pelagic trawls. The Japanese... Oh no, Beaks gasped. What? Zix Thor demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. What are the Japanese doing? They've modified their long lines, sir, Beaks said, her voice quivering. They're using our own magnetic mines as weights. Our shields can't distinguish them from our own equipment. The bridge crew stood frozen in disbelief as fishing nets of all shapes and sizes began rising into the atmosphere, lifted by the coordinated efforts of thousands of winch systems. Each net was weighted with the pirates' own magnetic mines, creating a vast web of electromagnetic interference that wreaked havoc on the Stellar Serpent's shields. But how are they coordinating all this? Science Officer Pix muttered in confusion. Their technology is supposed to be primitive. A new voice crackled over the comm. You boys ever hear of WhatsApp group chats? Been mighty active this morning. Captain, Krill's voice trembled with panic. That transmission came from a Vietnamese fishing boat in the Pacific. Peterson's voice returned, now tinged with amusement. See, you caught us at a rather interesting time. The United Nations Ocean Conference wrapped up last week. Most of the commercial fishing captains were already in contact with each other when we spotted your your little drones yesterday. Word travels fast. The sensor display updated again, showing fishing vessels from every major maritime nation, now coordinating their movements using nothing more than group messages and centuries of fishing expertise. Sir, Beaks shouted, her eyes wide with horror. Their nets are incorporating some kind of monofilament we can't scan. It's interfering with our engines. Iron strength fishing line, Peterson explained casually. Stuff we use for tuna and marlin. Tested up to several tons of pressure. Now, imagine thousands of boats using it at once. Zix-Thor watched, his heart sinking, as the stellar serpent was slowly and inevitably trapped in an expanding web of terrestrial fishing equipment. Every attempt to power through the nets only seemed to entangle them further. This is unprecedented, Pix cried out. Their primitive technology shouldn't be able to. Let me stop you right there, Peterson interrupted, his voice steady. You know what humans caught before we had all this fancy equipment? Whales. Great big ones, using nothing but rowboats and hand-thrown harpoons. You really think a single spaceship is going to give us trouble? To underscore his point, a massive Korean fishing vessel deployed something that looked eerily like a whale harpoon, albeit modified with one of the pirates' own magnetic mines. It struck the stellar serpent's hull with a resounding clang. Chief Engineer? A new voice rang out over the ship's internal comm. Sir, you should know that a hull breach right now would be really unfortunate, especially since we're caught in about 40 different types of fishing net. Zix-Thor slumped in his command chair, the weight of his complete failure pressing down on him. How many vessels are involved in this fish story? Zix-Thor asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Peterson, always cheerful, supplied the answer helpfully. Well, let's see. We've got about 200 boats here on the Grand Banks. The Pacific fleets brought another 300 or so. Mediterranean fleets brought about 150. Then there's the Indian Ocean Group, the South African crews, the Australians, carry the one, I'd say roughly 1,500 vessels. Give or take a few recreational boats that wanted in on the fun. The bridge crew stared in stunned silence at their tactical display. Countless dots representing Earth's fishing vessels surrounded them, forming a tightening net of maritime retribution. Oh, and you might want to power down your engines, Peterson added casually. These nets, they're mighty expensive. You break M, you bought M. Though I'm not sure what the exchange rate is for space credits to Earth dollars. At that moment, a small fishing boat from Nova Scotia decided to demonstrate the surprising effectiveness of a simple crab pot launcher against the alien hull plating. Zix-Thor, his scales now a solid shade of surrender white, muttered, What are your terms? Peterson replied smoothly. Well now, he drawled. First, you're going to help us haul in all these nets. You know how long it takes to untangle fishing equipment. Then we're thinking your fancy ship might make a nice artificial reef after we study it a bit. As for your crew, Peterson glanced at GRA, who was now surprisingly adept at cleaning cod. How's that career change feeling, friend? GRA looked up from his work, his armor now covered in fish scales, but there was a relaxed smile on his face, something that hadn't been there in years. The benefits package is surprisingly good, he admitted, and I haven't had job satisfaction like this since I quit the Galactic Peace Corps. Zix-Thor stared at the view screen, then at his bridge crew, then back at the thousands of fishing vessels that had completely outmaneuvered the most notorious space pirates in the sector. He sighed deeply. Lieutenant, he said finally, his voice resigned, send the surrender signal, and ask them if they need any help with the afternoon catch. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Atlantic as the largest coordinated fishing operation in human history entered its final phase. The Lucky Strike had become an impromptu command center, with Captain Peterson coordinating the entire effort through a mix of radio calls, satellite phones, and a surprisingly effective WhatsApp group titled Space Pirates Are Dumb. Norwegian fleet, tighten up that starboard net. Japanese crews, maintain tension on those long lines. Peterson barked into his radio. Vietnamese boats, get ready with those reinforced troll cables. Above them, the stellar serpent hung suspended in an ever-tightening web of fishing equipment that would have made a giant squid think twice. Every attempt to move only seemed to entangle the ship further in specialized nets. Nets, Billy from the Greek fleet reported, checking his phone. They finished adapting their swordfish harpoons with the magnetic mines. Ready on your signal. Beautiful, Peterson grinned. You hear that, Captain Zix-Thor? Your fancy mines make excellent fishing weights. The alien captain's voice crackled through the radio, long past any pretense of dignity. This is unprecedented. The Galactic Pirate Code clearly states that primitive civilizations are supposed to surrender immediately. Funny thing about humans and supposed to, Peterson said, grinning as a flotilla of Spanish trawlers expertly maneuvered their nets into position. We tend to ignore that part. On the Lucky Strike's deck, Warrior Chief GRA had swapped his fierce fearsome battle armor for a pair of borrowed waterproof overalls. While sorting through the morning's catch, he sighed in contentment. You know, he said to nobody in particular, I haven't felt this relaxed in years. Do you humans always whistle while you work? Billy asked, showing GRA how to properly pack ice around the fish. Speaking of which, the deck vibrated as a massive Korean fishing vessel launched another modified harpoon, this one trailing a net reinforced with strands of the pirates' own energy-absorbing hull material, salvaged from their captured boarding pods. Sir, Lieutenant Beck's panicked voice crackled over the radio. They're using our technology against us. These humans, they're learning and adapting at an impossible rate. That's not even the best part, Peterson chuckled, his voice carrying a mischievous tone. Tell your captain what you see on the horizon. A tense moment of silence followed, and then Zix Thor's voice, now quavering, came back through the comm. Are those pleasure craft? Indeed, hundreds of recreational fishing boats had appeared from nearby ports. Their small size allowed them to weave between the larger vessels, and each carried something that made the pirates' scales turn pale. Fishing enthusiasts with cameras. Smile for Instagram, Peterson called out cheerfully. Though I reckon your ship will be trending on TikTok by dinner time. The pirates watched in horror as their humiliating capture was broadcast to the world. Countless smartphones, digital cameras, and at least one overly enthusiastic YouTuber kept shouting about smashing that like button. Portuguese fleet reports their nets are in position, Billy announced. Australian crews have locked down the lower quadrant. Canadian fishermen have secured the fore and aft sections. Peterson picked up his radio again. Well, Captain Zix Thor, looks like you have two choices. One, we can keep playing this game until your ship is so tangled we have to cut it apart to free it. Two, you can power down, surrender properly, and maybe learn something about real piracy from some Somali fishermen I know. They've been giving me great advice over WhatsApp. Back on the Stellar Serpent's bridge, Zix Thor looked at his crew. Pix had buried her head in her appendages. Krill was openly sobbing, and Navigator Trill was scribbling furiously, taking notes on human fishing techniques. How? Zix Thor asked finally, his voice filled with disbelief. How did you coordinate all this so quickly? You really want to know? Peterson's voice was full of pride now. Every fishing fleet in the world already talks to each other. We share information about weather, fish movements, equipment improvements. When we spotted your drones yesterday, the Portuguese thought they were Japanese spy devices. The Japanese figured they were Russian. The Russians blamed the Americans. By the time we figured out they were alien, well, let's just say you united Earth's fishing community came together like nothing else could. A cheer erupted from the assembled boats as the final nets locked into place. The Stellar Serpent, once a fearsome symbol of galactic piracy, now resembled nothing more than a massive fish, completely wrapped in the world's largest drift net. Attention all crews, Peterson's voice echoed across the comms, loud and clear. Commence final capture sequence on my mark. 3, 2, 1, pull. At once, thousands of winches activated simultaneously. The sound of straining cables filled the air as fishing vessels from every maritime nation worked in perfect harmony. The Stellar Serpent, once the terror of the space lanes, the pride of the galactic pirate fleet, was reeled in like a particularly stubborn tuna. I must admit, GRA said, watching his former ship being slowly dragged down, humans have elevated fishing to an art form. Do you think I could apply for a work visa? Peterson clapped him on the shoulder, grinning. Already got the paperwork started. You're looking at the newest apprentice fisherman on the Lucky Strike. Though we'll have to do something about those extra arms. Could be handy during crab season. As the Stellar Serpent finally surrendered to the combined might of Earth's fishing fleets, a message flashed across the pirates' communication system. It was from the Galactic Pirate Federation. Attention all pirates. Earth now classified as extreme hazard zone. Approach at own risk. Beware of fishing nets. 6 months after the Great Space Pirate Fishing Expedition, Captain Mike Peterson sat in his favorite dockside bar in Nova Scotia, sharing drinks with his newest crew member, GRA. The former warrior chief of the defeated space pirates had traded his fearsome battle armor for a well-worn fishing jacket and a captain's cap. So then, Peterson asked, trying not to spill his beer from laughing, the Galactic News Network calls it what? The fishnet incident, GRA replied, his 3 eyes twinkling with amusement. It's become required viewing at the Galactic Naval Academy. They're using it to teach cadets about the dangers of underestimating primitive species. The bar's television showed footage from that legendary day, captured by thousands of smartphones and fishing vessel cameras. The Stellar Serpent, once the pride of the space pirate fleet, now served as the world's most advanced artificial reef after Earth's governments had finished studying its technology. How's old Zix Thor taking his new career? Peterson asked, waving to Billy as he entered the bar. Surprisingly well, GRA chuckled. The galactic prison system's rehabilitation program matched him with a Norwegian salmon farming operation. Apparently, he's revolutionizing their feeding techniques with modified tractor beam technology. Billy pulled up a chair, grinning. Just got off the phone with our friends in the Japanese fleet. You won't believe what they caught in their nets this morning. Please tell me it wasn't more space pirates, Peterson groaned. No, ever since the Galactic Federation posted those warning beacons around Earth's solar system, we haven't seen a single raider. The latest signs? Apparently, red warning, extreme danger zone. Inhabitants have mastered the art of net warfare. The bar's patrons, mostly fishermen who had participated in the historic capture, raised their glasses in a toast. Did you see the latest update from the United Nations Fishing Committee? Billy asked, pulling out his phone. They're implementing some of our suggested modifications to commercial fishing equipment. Turns out those magnetic mines make excellent fish aggregating devices when properly waterproofed. Peterson nodded proudly. And to think, 6 months ago we were just regular fishermen. Now Earth's getting known across the galaxy as the planet of the nets. GRA finished raising his glass. The space pirates tell stories about this place now. They say Earth's oceans are guarded by fearsome warriors who can snare a starship like it's nothing more than a wayward mackerel. Speaking of stories, Billy added, that video you posted of the capture just hit 2 billion views on YouTube. The ad revenue alone is paying for the whole fleet's fuel costs this year. Through the bar's window, they could see the Lucky Strike docked in the harbor, its new magnetic crane system glinting in the setting sun. The crane, reverse-engineered from the pirates' technology, had made their fishing operations twice as efficient. You know what the funniest part is? Peterson mused, ordering another round. We didn't even have to fire a single shot, just used what we already knew about catching big, unwanted things in our oceans. Humans are terrifying, GRA said with admiration. The galactic community now uses your species as an example of why you should never judge a civilization by its technology level alone. A notification pinged on several phones simultaneously. The fishermen's WhatsApp group, still named Space Pirates Are Dumb, but now used for coordinating global fishing operations, had a new message. Well, would you look at that? Peterson grinned, reading the text. The Galactic Federation just officially recognized Earth's territorial waters. Seems they were mighty impressed by our demonstration of defensive capabilities. To Earth's fishermen, GRA proposed a toast, raising his glass. The only humans crazy enough to catch a spaceship with fishing nets. The bar echoed as the sun set over the Atlantic. The Lucky Strike's crew enjoyed their well-earned reputation as the first humans to prove that sometimes the simplest solutions work best, even against advanced alien technology. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, pirates told their children to behave, or the Earth fishermen would come for them with their dreaded nets.